Alright guys, just going over some ABG stuff. I've done about 100 of these on ABG Ninja, and I get them all right. I never miss one, and it's just the simple way I try to remember things. It works for me, hopefully it works for you. It's kind of the Curry method, I guess, but maybe a little different. I don't know, but I'm just going to go over it. Hopefully it helps some people, hopefully. So let's just keep it really simple at first. Let's just start out with pH, right? Everybody knows pH, 7.35 to 7.45, right? And we all know a low pH is an acid, and a high pH is a base, or alkaline, however you want to say it, right? What they left out today, what I felt was really important in success, is 7.4. Oops, 7.4. 7.4 is your golden number. 7.4 is super important because say you get a pH value on your ABGs and it's 7.37, or you're going to be like, well, that falls within the neutral range. What is that? I don't know. Well, it's below 7.4. If it's below 7.4, it's always an acid. If it's above 7.4, it's always a base or alkaline, however you want to say it. Just remember, 7.4 is your golden number. Super important. The range kind of comes later. All that you got to start out with is it above or below 7.4. So we have our other values, our CO2 and our bicarb. I'm just going to put BC for bicarb. So the Curry way, which is kind of easy, keeping all the acids on one side and all the bases on the other side. It's kind of easy, so we'll just go with that for now. So CO2 is 45 to 35. You know, above 45 is an acid, below 35 is a base. And then bicarb, according to ATI, is 21 to 28. Now, if you're doing like the ABG Ninja stuff, it's going to be 22 to 26. But let's focus on ATI levels because that's what we're probably going to get tested on. So the way I remember the bicarb number is I just think it's a divisible of 7. Like 28, 7 goes into that 4 times. 21, 7 goes into that 3 times. That's how I remember. That works for me. It might not work for you. All right, so let's start with a 1, right? Let's start with a normal number, or a pH number, excuse me. And we're going to say, because this was confusing some people, I guess, or seemed confusing, let's say it's 7.44. Like it falls in normal range, right? So people are like, wow, is that a base or an alkaline? I don't know. Well, it's above 7.4, so it's a base because 7.4 is the golden number. So let's do our CO2. And let's say our CO2 is 28. Hey, it's a base 2. Look at that. We got 2 bases going. Now, let's say our BC, our bicarb, we're going to call that 16. It's an acid, right? It's way below 21 on the acid side. It's an acid. So, pretty simple. Now, this is where I feel like people are getting muddled a little bit, but just find which 2 match up. So, these 2 match up, right? So that's what it is. If it was these 2 that matched up, then it would be metabolic, but it's not metabolic. It's CO2 matches up. That's respiratory. So since CO2 and pH match up, it's going to be a respiratory issue. Like I said, if it was the other way around, if this was an acid and this was a base, if these numbers were different, then it would be metabolic because it's whatever matches your pH. If they both match, it's a combination. But let's not get into that right now. Let's keep it simple for this little part. So since these are both a base, you know it's respiratory, right? And since they're both a base, you know it's alkalosis or dosis, however you say it. I suck at pronouncing stuff, but yeah, respiratory alkalosis. Now, this is going to be metabolic acidosis because it's compensating, right? Like these are bases. This is the acid trying to compensate for that base. Now, this is in normal range, right? This is between 735 and 745. Whenever it's between 735 and 745, whenever your pH is in normal range down here, if it's in normal range, it's always, every time, it's fully compensated. So since pH is the normal range, it's fully comped, or fully compensated. So we kept it simple, right? Which one matched up? These were both bases. So we know, hey, it's respiratory, because CO2 is respiratory, and bicarb is metabolic. So yeah, we figured that out. Boom, simple, right? And then we just looked at our next step was just look at the pH actual level. Where does that fall? Well, that fell in normal range this time, so it's fully compensated. If it fell in a different range, if it was, say, 754, like, it's still a base, but now it's out of normal range, so it wouldn't be fully compensated anymore. It would be partially compensated because it's not in the range it should be. Does that make sense? Like, fully compensated and partially compensated all matters on the pH. Now you might be like, well, where does no compensation come in? Well, no compensation would come in if one of these numbers was in normal range. Remember that whole, like, you put an N next to it thing that Curry did? Well, that actually works. So say our bicarb was 24. That's totally in normal range, right? So it's no longer an acid, it's in normal range. It's nothing, it's neutral. So no, like he was saying, it's a neutral. NO for no compensation. There's now no comp. That makes sense? So I guess we could try another one. Let's try another set of numbers. Let's do 7.28 for our pH, and then our CO2 and our BC. So let's say our CO2 is, we'll just make that, 54. So, it's on the acid side of things. This is on the acid side of things. Now, let's complicate this just a little bit. Not really though, just a tad though. Let's say our bicarb is also on the acidic side. Let's say it's 18, right? So now all three of them are acidic. Well, that just means it's the combination. All three are there. So it's respiratory and metabolic acidosis because all three lined up. And there's no compensation because all three of them are on the acid side. If one of them was on the base side, like if bicarb was on the base side, well, then there'd be some compensation, partial compensation. But there's no compensation because they're all acidic. So let's do one more. Let's do pH. Let's do 7.25. We'll make it an acid again. And then we'll do our CO2 as, let's just say, 28. So that's going to be, a base because it's below 35. And then let's say our bicarb. We're going to go ahead and make our bicarb an acid. We'll just say it's 18. All right, well, which two are the same? Pretty obvious, right? These two are the same this time. So now we know it's metabolic because it's not in the lungs. It's in, like, your blood, your kidneys or whatever. It's metabolic. So we have, and it's acid, so it's metabolic acidosis. So meta-acid is what I wrote there. You can't read it. Metabolic acidosis. Because these two match up. And now we have to look at our CO2 to find out our compensation, right? Or, I mean, not our compensation, but our, we look at our pH to see if it's compensated, if it's fully compensated. So since that's not in normal range, it's not fully compensated. Remember, it can only be fully compensated if pH is in normal range. And we're below it, so we're not. So we have metabolic acidosis with partial compensation. Partial comp. Now, if you want to get a little more complicated on that, you could say it's technically respiratory alkalosis partially compensated because our respiratory is a base. It's an it's alkyne, right? Alkaline. I can't talk, sorry. But yeah, but it's not. So we're just gonna keep it simple for now and say that it's partially compensated. Oh, I hope I'm not making this confusing at all. Let's try one that's in normal range. I guess we kind of went over that earlier though, but I don't want to make this video too long, but I hope this helps explain things a little earlier, I think some of the best things to take from this is remember that 7.4 is your golden number. You always start with, is your pH below or above 7.4? So once you figure that out, you know, hey, my pH is way above it, so it's a base. You know that you're dealing with a base. Even if it's a normal range and it's above it, it's a base. And then the next thing you look at is which match up. So, you know, these both were bases in this time, so they matched up. This one ended up being neutral on this one, so it didn't match, but we knew we had respiratory alkanosis because these ones matched. And there was no compensation because this was a normal range. Remember, if this was in a different range, if it was, 14 instead of 28 or whatever, or 24, well then it would be partially compensated because that would now be an acid, but this is still out of range, so it's going to be partial comp because it's trying to get there, but it hasn't got the pH into normal range yet. Okay, so if anybody has any questions, I can talk to you on the phone. I think everybody has my number. If you don't, shoot me a message on here and I'll give it to you. But I just really want everyone to understand this because I know it comes up a lot on ATIs and everything else moving forward from here. You guys all know my brother's been through the program and he really drilled into my head that ABGs are super important. So yeah, sorry for the super long video. Hopefully it helped explain things. Hit me up if you have any questions.